they did the activity without worrying too much about the numbers, but that yielded the numbers that they got in the end. And so I think AI is going to enable more of that because we'll have deeper data in terms of what it takes to actually be successful in executing a strategy.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Sales Transformation Lab podcast from Uhubs. Today, I'm super excited because we're launching a new series called Sales Enablement Pioneers. And I have two wonderful people with me. I have Leah Dolan, who's actually the head of customer services and success here at Uhubs. And we have Celine from SBR, who is a go-to-market transformation specialist and head of enablement at SBR, one of our partners. I'd love, Celine, for you to introduce yourself and give us a bit more about your background.
Ash, yes, thank you. I'm really excited to be with you as well here today. My background is in sales through and through. I started as an individual contributor and then moved to leadership with a specialty to actually scale SaaS organization in Europe, mostly coming from America. And about 10 years ago, I did a transition to sales enablement and enabling some of these skills and supporting, again, EMEA, North American and APAC organization, accelerate growth within their market and supporting the GTM team do that. So this is something I do at SBR, and obviously also we're working with clients to enable some of those best practice and enable them to accelerate growth as well in their GTM teams.
Amazing. Thank you, Celine, for the introduction. I know Leah's got a whole bunch of excellent questions for you as well. And as part of the Sales Enablement Pioneers podcast, we're going to talk about the changes that are happening in sales enablement and what you see. So go ahead, Leah. What's your set of first questions?
First of all, it's lovely to meet you, Celine. I'm very excited for this conversation. I wanted to start off with kind of in go-to-market teams, we often segment almost everything from territories, accounts, customer tiers, but enablement often still delivers a one-size-fits-all program. Why do you think that enablement has historically struggled to personalize development at the same level?
I think this is an interesting question, actually. I think that there's probably about three parts to that. There's a legacy, and so we keep doing the same thing. It's not, we expect different results, but we're not quite seeing what we need to change. And so there's a legacy from an ND who traditionally are here to cater for the whole organization, don't want to leave anything behind. And so there's a standard towards that, there's a bias towards that standardization. So historically, it's optimized for efficiency and consistency with global rollouts and centralized playbook. And so that produces generic programs. The second part, I think, there's weak data foundation. So it's difficult to know what to do specifically if you don't have the data to back it up. And so when you look at territory or account sharing, you were referring to you literally, in order to do that, you need to have the data. And so enablement need to be stronger in accessing that granular data that is going to enable them to actually have that behavioral data, that performance data, that, that is going to help that. I think also the third point for me is that operational mismatch and that misunderstanding. So a lot of enablement function, less and less, but a lot of enablement functions started as very reactive. So you've got managers on the floor, they spot something that very often is anecdotal, right? Where they're going to walk the floor and notice somebody doing something and they're going to go, we need a training on negotiation, or we need people to be better at doing X, Y, Z. Again, without validating by data. So it may be anecdotal and biased. And then suddenly we guide everybody through those programs. So the top performers are going to be bored to death. The laggers are not going to be able to catch up. And then you kind of rely on a few people to be able to actually pick up some of the learnings and be able to apply it. But in terms of efficiency or effectiveness of the program, definitely not getting there anymore.
That's super interesting, talking about the data side, Celine. In your mind, with the changes that are happening in sales enablement now with AI and multiple tools being used and lots of noise and lots of data, what are the key data signals that you look for when you're looking at doing sales transformation work?
So I have also short for that short difference in the population. So I'm looking onboarding. I have a set of data that is going to inform me as to whether the onboarding is successful. Product enablement, same thing. Account management, same thing, et cetera, leadership, same thing. But beyond this, right, I can only go into that granular data if I look at the pool of people I have and I understand the capabilities that they need in order to hit whatever objective the company is having. And if you move from one company to the next, it's not the same. So we have the feeling that the same capabilities apply to everybody and every company. If it was the case, somebody who's successful in one company would be consistently successful in every single company they go to. And we know that's not the case. Right?
Yeah.
And so it goes back to what is the strategy of the company? And what is the execution that is needed in order to be able to complete on that strategy? And execution are relying on people knowing what to do, which are your skills and competency, doing it, which is the activity, the behavior, the mindset, and the data that is going to inform you as to whether they're there or not. So, sorry, it's a bit of a long answer, but then in terms of data, I'm going to look at competency. Do they have the skills that are needed for that specific role to hit that specific execution that is going to drive the result of that strategy? Are they doing it? So you're looking at performance, you're looking at activity data, or are they doing a lot of activity that is not yielding any result, right? For whatever reason, because we don't have the tools, the system, whatever reason it is. And then there's a third element to this, right? Especially because I've been working in SaaS and scale up, you don't always have the people that are super polished with all the capabilities that you need. But what you need to understand is who has the most potential to develop those capabilities. And so I would hire rough diamond, right? And then be able to then ramp them up within a specific amount of time that would be factored into targets and all the rest of it in order to have top performers. But you need people who have the potential to develop those capabilities or change. Or, if the company is doing a pivot, for example, who in the team has got the capability, potential to be able to develop the capabilities that is going to enable the team to pivot.
I really like the way you're thinking about potential here, Celine. How do you define potential in people, especially with the sales team? As you know, there's big egos in sales teams. Everyone thinks they're amazing salespeople. But how do you define potential? Does this start at hiring, or is that during a team already being put together? How do you look at this?
So there's different ways to look at it, right? So at hiring, I would look for coachability. So are people coachable? And there's very easy things you can do at hiring in order to be able to check that, right? Share information, see how it's been assimilated, guide them. If I do a panel interview, for example, as a sales leader or as an enablement leader, when I hire people, there's going to be a panel at the end or a use case. Sorry. The use case is going to be something short. I don't want people to spend 40 hours on doing a use case, right? There's a couple of things I'm going to look at. I'm going to extend an offer to have a coaching call with me if they want to rehearse some of that before the panel and see if they take it. See if they take it, do they take the feedback? So the hiring experience should be a reflection of how you're going to work together with that person, not an extraordinary situation in which the person is never going to find themselves into the world of work, right? And so we need to again rethink the way we're hiring so that we can measure the thing that matters in the organization in terms of collaboration. My team members, when they do interview, are also going to look for coachability. That doesn't guarantee that people have got the potential to develop the skills. That's just one element of it. When you look at potential for capabilities, there is something that HR has been doing for a while, but then there's a number of companies at the cutting edge, right? And then SBI is really at the cutting edge of this as well. It's the ability to be able to look for each competency. What are the preferences of people when they look at these competencies? So let's say you have a company that historically has been working with existing network and existing client and doing very little prospecting, and they're doing a pivot and they need more new business. Who in the team has got that preference towards prospection? And this psychometric is the only way to actually be able to actually assess it. It doesn't mean, if you have a low preference, it doesn't mean that you're not going to be able to develop. It just means it's going to take longer because this is not something that you are intrinsically going to be leaning towards, right? But what it means as well is that as a head of enablement, I'm going to put most of the resource and the effort on people who have a tendency and a preference towards prospecting because I know I'm going to yield results much quicker. The beauty of this is because I also have performance and level of capability, I'm also able to predict how much revenue I'm going to be able to make out of them progressing from one level to the next. And so it gives me the ability as an enablement leader to have really targeted high value conversation with the CRO, with the COO, and for them themselves to be able to actually have development plan for their team in terms of how they're going to leverage, the execution layer to hit the strategy, with conversation that are actually completely different to what we do. Oh, we've done that program and we're hoping for the best.
Yeah, that makes sense. I quite like that. How do you deal with the situation, Celine, when you meet a CRO and they're like, the team just need to hit the ground running and we don't have time? And how does it work in terms of looking at potentiality to performance in terms of timescales in your mind?
Yeah, there's a sense of urgency, and we find that specifically with first line leaders, right? And to me, from an enablement perspective, the one thing is, I don't take leadership in isolation or sales program in isolation. You've got an ecosystem and you've got to look across the ecosystem. You're not launching a sales program or an account development program, negotiation program to the sales team. You're launching it to the organization. What are the cross-functional links that you need, and how do you hold each other accountable? And what is the first line leader? I'm not teaching them to do negotiation. I'm teaching them to coach, to deal review, to pipeline review, to help them multi-thread, do referrals, anticipate procurement early, and so on and so forth. And so the regional is then going to coach the team lead to actually be able to coach. And so you have an ecosystem that is sustainable, where everybody, instead of having the first line leader that does everything, or have different roles and responsibility, you've got that clarity of expectation. You've got things you can measure as well, because then progress, not perfection, well done, SaaS. And so that's one way to go about it. The other thing is to really do, when you go into a call with a client as a consultant, as a sales person, you are going to do an element of qualification of the problem. And this is the same with the leaders. So what is the problem? How have they diagnosed the root cause of the problem? How do you know that's what it is? How do you know it's global to the team and not anecdotal? What happens if, they don't fix the problem and they have empty seats, or the people still do not perform? What does that look like? And also, realistically, again, with data, it's much easier to inform a conversation where you're going to go, okay, the average life cycle is 2 months. You have a pipeline that is 1 time 5. Realistically, let's sit down and see what it's going to look like in order to be able to accelerate, and whether we're actually putting that acceleration towards the end of the year. But let's look right now at what we need to do. And a good example of this, actually, Ash is a leader. As a head of enablement, I was asked in January to put a negotiation training for some of the top performers and for the leaders. And we had a pipeline that looked pretty weak, because we'd literally pull everything from Q1 to actually close a financial year. And my question was really around, is negotiation what you need right now when your pipeline is empty and you don't have anything to negotiate? And so therefore the team is not even going to have the ability to practice. To which I was told, we want it as a reward for the leaders because we promised it. So you suddenly understand, by just qualifying, that this is not a business imperative. This is kind of the carrot that they dangle and say, we're going to do this for your personal development. But then that doesn't come out of my budget, right? It's just slightly different. But then in June, we had a pipeline issue, and they came back and said, what can we do about the pipeline, right? And so you don't win all the battles, but having the data is enabling you to be able to be more intent in terms of the effort, because there's never enough enablement heads for the amount of effort that is needed. Right? So I'll help you understand maybe some of the approach. It's a personal approach as well. Some other leaders might have a completely different approach to this.
Yeah. I love that framing, Celine, that you said. When you're launching sales transformation, it's not to the people, it's to the whole organization. And it
Yeah.
needs to fit to the organization, because the thinking needs to start from the top and the bottom and the middle, not just the people that you're going for. And that's where training kind of fails, because it's like, right, we need to do training and it hits the people, and then nothing else happens afterwards. So I love that framing that you've done. Launch sales transformation to the organization, not to just the people itself.
RevOps is part of it. Sales ops is part of it.
Yeah.
The C-suite is part of it. CSMs are part of it. Support maybe sometimes.
Yeah.
Sales engineers are part of it. Execs are part of it. And so the key here is not everybody needs the same content. Everybody needs to know what their role is and how they can best support the next layer. And so you have programs that, yes, they take a lot more time to develop. Yes, you might need external perspective if you've never done it before in order to be able to help you get there. But what you have is things that are more condensed in time. We've all sat for hours and hours and hours of training and nothing changes.
Yep.
And so, yes, that program and that knowledge absorption is important, but what matters is also the adoption in terms of journey. And so, I'm going to share a quirky fact about me is the fact that I've, lived in 4 countries. I worked in 22 and I've moved house 27 times. I'm really, really good at change management.
20?
That has to be a record.
I didn't move until I was 18 as well, just so you know.
Wow.
We are going to have been 4 years in this house, as long as we've ever been in any house ever. This is insane. But I'm very good at change management.
Right.
I understand change management, what it takes to actually be going from one community to the next, to the next, to the next. Because, if it was just moving 10 kilometers away, it would be too simple, right? And all these skills are transferable. And so when you look at an organization in that execution layer, you really you don't have time to waste like 2 years and 3 years for change adoption. It's great, but by that time you've lost the momentum. The target has changed. If you look at where you want to go from point A to point B, you've got the direction of travel, right? That's your strategy. That's your objective, your OKRs. You've got the speed at which we travel as well. How long are you going to take to go there? Because if you don't have the direction, you're going to land somewhere else, right? And you're going to go there very quickly at speed, and you're going to burn the whole ecosystem around you. People are going to run out of steam because they're not getting the result. If you have the speed, if you have the direction but not the speed, by the time you reach the objective, it might not be relevant anymore. The world has changed. Look, AI is completely bulldozed any of the strategy that were drafted 5 years ago from companies, right? So they had to go back to the drawing board. You might get complacent. You might decide that, you don't want to do that. And finally, you've got the skills, driving skills on that journey that are going to get you there, because there are going to be twists and turns and obstacles, and you need to be able to have those skills to be able to navigate these. So these are the 3 things that I'm looking into a change journey or an adoption journey that I can equip people so they can be self-sufficient. The idea is not to drag them through. The idea is they go through and they're accountable for the changes that they put in place, and they see great benefit at their own level of doing that. And it's getting them more in alignment with the strategy, with the objectives, and then everybody's happy.
I love that. And I think that would probably really help with the kind of moving on from that one size fits all, if they're being accountable for their change and how they feel, and driving that adoption. So I really like that approach.
Yeah, people do it in every time. It's not, you're good to have groups that move quicker than others. Which goes back to also identifying the potential of people to be able to develop quicker, because once you've got those group and you use them as the leading group, then you create an effect and momentum as well in terms of success that helps the other groups catch up as well.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's all one big jigsaw.
One big circle. You touched on kind of like challenges in terms of the leaders wanting to hit the ground running, making change really quickly, but also kind of struggling with that resource allocation and trying to figure out where to prioritize, what's needed. How should leaders kind of think about where to invest their time, their budget, especially when not every rep will generate the same return from that development effort?
That's an interesting question, because you look typically when you get first line leaders, right? Frontline leaders are so key, and they need to spend a lot of time with their team. And so they need to look down at their team and just really focus on that execution. Very often you have, this is news to no one, right? You have superstars that were promoted to management, no training, no, very little understanding. People do competency framework, and they have competency framework for their individual contributors, but not really for their leaders. They have one global for all the leaders. But actually, as a frontline manager, as a director, as a C-suite, you've got 3 different jobs. And so you're not doing the job, that somebody else is doing not as well. This is not different responsibility. And so the clarity of what that frontline leader is doing is going to be key to them doing it. And it's going to be key to the team executing as well. And so as an enablement leader, it's that prioritization that needs to happen, and that communication that needs to come not from enablement, but that needs to come from their C-level. their CRO, lays down the organization, the ways of working, and so on.
How should leaders think about where to invest their time and their budget?
So they need to invest the time and the budget to what their responsibilities are. And I think in terms of time as well, frontline leaders should invest their time. I remember having that conversation with one of my directors as a sales leader. I remember we were short on forecast for that quarter. He was like, Celine, can you pick up the phone and close some of the deals? I said, I can. Or I can get 10 people picking up the phone and closing deals. Which one do you want? Right? And so the answer to doing the job on your own is never going to be a better output than getting 10 people really good at what they're doing and doing the job. Right? And for information, we went from minus 40% to plus 70% year growth year on year after that conversation in 9 months, right? So point proven. That was loads of blood and sweat and tears. But this was the idea. So investment of time and effort depends of your performance. So again, strategy, what are my numbers saying? What are the levers that can give me the quick wins, the quick input? What are some of the small changes that I can make in the team? So leaders need to be able to self-reflect. So they need the data, right? And they need to not do all of it. It's really the prioritization. Where will I get the best outcome for the least amount of effort? And then if I need to spend time and effort on big initiatives, what are the ones that are going to really, truly move the needle? And who do I need? And the next thing is, do not do this alone. Who do I need in the organization to help me? Do I need HR? Do I need product? Do I need marketing? Do I need enablement? Do I need RevOps, sales? Who else do I need in order to help me there? And so a little bit more of that. The other thing that I wish leaders would spend more time is QBRs with that team on quarterly basis in a real and operational cadence. I don't think there's enough rigor in the operational cadence that most companies run in terms of forecast, pipeline review, one-to-one. Everything becomes kind of a one conversation where we touch point. We talk a lot. We have great relationship. We're aware of the deals, but we don't have the rigor of the operational cadence in really truly understanding why they're different. Investing time and effort in codifying what good looks like for your organization is going to save you a huge amount of time. So instead of having a 1 hour, 1.5 conversation every week with the team members and having a result, you're just going to have things that are really actionable. You're going to have data insight for your senior leadership that is going to be able to inform the decision in terms of whatever, investment, hiring, product, to be able to actually feed back to some of the other departments, some of the friction point that may happen or may not happen, and where they can help, where we can win, where we can lose, where we can accelerate the sales cycle, where we can increase average order value that you're not going to get if you don't get that rigor and that operational cadence. So spending time on that, it's not as fun as just having as doing some of the other things, but it is something that is needed and something that leaders need to invest time and resources as well on.
100%. And I think you can really, if you do invest that time and energy and the blood, sweat and tears, as you said, to get that sorted, I feel like the returns will be tenfold, right?
100%. It's going to be less exhausting for people as well, because you get more clarity, you get more direction, you actually know what works, what doesn't work. You can have a fail culture, which is low impact. So people are happy to try new things, share with other people. There's, I don't know if you know the first Pancake Principle. Or
The what, sorry?
The first Pancake Principle. Actually, I mentioned it to Laura, as Ismail mentioned.
Oh, okay.
This came out of a podcast between Simon Sinek, Adam Grant, and Brené Brown, where they randomly get together at some stage and just hold this conversation. I think it's Brené Brown who was saying about the first Pancake Principle. When you make, everybody loves pancake, right? But when you make pancakes, the first one is never great. The pan is too hot, or the pan is too cold, or the batter is too thin, or the batter is too thick. But you still need to do the first pancake to understand what you need to change in order to make the second and the third one and the delicious ones that actually come after. And so what it means is that in the team with the first Pancake Principle, you can encourage people to do things for the first time with a very low impact in terms of confidence, self-esteem, fear to fail, or whatever. Nobody has ever done something for the first time and nailed it. Doesn't happen, right? And so what it means is then when people will start sharing project earlier, So in the enablement team, I remember we were putting a program that's a little bit groundbreaking for the organization. And so I didn't want the team to have a perfect draft before it came out. So they literally did something that was, very rough, but I wanted the input from everybody else on it. So we just arrived in the meeting and said, this is a first pancake. People were excited to get into it. And people were excited to get feedback from it because it's a first pancake, right? And so we're not talking about failing or whatever. We're just looking at, is the batter too thin, too thick, the pan too hot, too cold? What do we need to do in order to improve it? And so some of these small edges that you implement in the mindset of your teams is going to make a big difference in how you lead the organization. It's going to make a big difference in terms of time saving because you don't have as much procrastination on to the outcome. And you've got more collaboration just for this one, right? For example, but I've got loads of little shortcuts like this that I'm using in order to be able to help people on that journey.
I love that.
I feel like having a pancake now, Celine.
Yeah.
Yay!
Not the first one, the second one.
The first one is great though.
Yeah.
Every time I use that metaphor, there's always somebody said, "Oh, I always eat the first pancake." It's great, but
Yeah, I
pancakes
do
are
too.
something to be celebrated, and people are not afraid of pancake, but they're afraid of the word fail because at
Yeah.
school, how many of us got like fail or whatever or focus on, so far, it's a pretty happy memory.
I must admit, Celine, it takes me at least 3 goes to get my pancakes right. So
Me
the
too.
first one being bad, I'm actually on the third one going, still not working. It's still sticking. But yeah, I usually have my daughter to come to the rescue or somebody to help me. But yeah.
It's a good metaphor for people
It
to
really
understand
is.
that, because
Totally.
if you don't do it, then you don't have any pancake at all. So you need to get started. You need to start somewhere. And then you just need to self-reflect and just change and adapt in terms of what's going to work for you.
Totally.
I think I'm going to take that away every time I do a first draft of something. I want to say, this is my first pancake
There you go.
from now on. Amazing. And we briefly touched on kind of the world changing with AI and all these new platforms coming out. So it's really AI and performance data has really become embedded into enablement. Do you think that we're moving into a future where enablement is becoming more kind of predictive, where leaders are able to identify who's most likely to improve and which areas and what commercial impact that could drive?
I hope so. Right? When AI came up and said, "Oh, it's going to replace all our job," and I was like, I wanted to do my washing and my chores and the things that take me a long time. The same for work, right? I wanted to take the burden out at the moment. That's what I wanted to do. I don't necessarily want it to take the judgment out and some of the criticality of it, and the human aspect of it. When I look at it, though, I think we're a long way away. I think organizations are using AI as a glorified Google search. And so, yes, we get better output for sure. And it's an improvement. We're tapping on an, very, very small amount of capabilities in there. So AI can analyze super large data sets. And so you have the ability to be able to really truly understand which lead convert, which behavior moves the needle, what drive progression, what action increases win. And at the end of the day, we also need to remember that in GTM team, the people at the center of all of this is the customer. And so you can really truly get those data sets aggregated towards an experience for your customer that is going to actually be super consultative, super supportive, helping them drive value and all the things that we've been talking about for years, right? The other thing to your point, Leah, is that it is going to help to shift from a reactive to a proactive enablement, because we are going to be able to see with AI, and you can see that with conversation intelligence, whether it's anecdotal, right? Is 1 or 2 people on the floor at 11 o'clock on Tuesday that actually happen to have done or said something, or whether it's a pattern across the team that we could, work on. And it's going to equally be able to help us spot what works. A lot of companies, we focus on problem fixing as human beings, right? We see things and we want to fix them. We want to improve them. This is wired in our neurology. It's very important also in the process. I often say to clients, it's important to understand what works so you don't break it. So there's a particular client I'm thinking of where the NPS was in the late 80s, which for the business is insane. It's an insane NPS for anybody who knows the Net Promoter Score and how it's calculated, right? And yet they're not asking for referrals. So the question of the NPS is, would you refer us to a friend, right? Or to a peer? And so most people gave them 9 and 10. Yes, I would. They never ask the question. Then who would you refer us to? And so that's working. The NPS is great. It's working. It's here. It's sitting on the shelf. And so it's the ability with AI to be able to understand the areas of improvement, but also what is working that I can optimize. And again, we go back to that low effort and big impact. Because if you contact, and let's say even 1 out of 5 give you a name of somebody, then suddenly your whole lead generation and prospection is taking a completely different shape in terms of effort, but in terms of behavior of the team and the fact that you referred in. So then the acceleration of the sales cycle, there's a number of things. Higher order, average order value, stronger credibility, stronger trust, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a number of indicators that are coming to that. I think the last part with AI that gets me excited as well is the fact that you're forecasting human performance. You're really focusing on human performance rather than just pipeline, which at the moment through, the dashboard that we have, it really is that number. So it's activity pipeline, but then what sits behind the activity in terms of the performance, the behavior, the potential, and all those things are really, really important. I mean, as sales leaders, we've all had people who were in the team who were not performing, where leaders would have gone, oh, get rid of them. And you go, no, I know they have the potential. And then you coach them in the right way and so on. And they become superstar performers. One organization I had 2 people on PIPs. And within 6 months, they ended up being the number 1 and number 3 in the EMEA in terms of performance and in terms of numbers. What was missing is knowing which activity to do instead of just focusing on the output and the numbers. So once we put that in place, then, they did the activity without worrying too much about the numbers, but that yielded the numbers that they got in the end. And so I think AI is going to enable more of that because we'll have deeper data in terms of what it takes to actually be successful in executing the strategy.
Wow. That's super interesting. And I think as well, a lot of times people are so focused on that output that it can sometimes overwhelm people that are potentially not performing as much. So it's really interesting to hear that.
Also, I see performance improvement plan where somebody is going to take to have a 1x pipeline. Let's say they have to close 50K. And, they have 50K in the pipeline and they've got 2 weeks and you go, you need to close this, but they don't have any activity. Focus them on the activity first, because nothing is going to happen in the next 2 weeks if you are, life cycle, if your average, opportunity is taking 2 months to close, none of the opportunity they're going to open now is going to close in the next 2 weeks, or maybe they get a bluebird or something, right? So focus people on where controllable things that they can control, that because there's so many things that are completely outside of our control. It's really important to understand, what should my response to that situation be? And what is it that I can do in order to mitigate the current situation? And so then suddenly that puts people into a position which is more empowering rather than go, oh, there's nothing I can do about it because, it's out of my control.
Yeah, that's a great insight. That is all the questions I had for the session.
Leah, that was very thoughtful.
Asha,
Really good questions there, Leah. Some really good questions. We've got a few more minutes, so we can try and see if we can continue. Celine, I have a question around you being in the industry for a while now and have got all these skills and experiences and wisdom around sales enablement. If you were to advise a new junior sales enablement person who wants to now become a leader in sales enablement and go to market, what skills or attributes do you think they need?
Yeah. The first thing to get them is to get them a mentor. So there's plenty of sales enablement communities. They need to go out there. They need to go at, leaders, and they need to pick somebody that can give them mentorship, because it is still a field that is relatively new. And so a lot of the knowledge is still tribal, right? In terms of capability that they need to be comfortable with ambiguity. That's for sure. Because the role itself is ambiguous, because the GTM organization are more ambiguous than ever. We know that the CRO tenure is about 18 months in SaaS right now, which is insane. right?
Right.
How much time do you have in 18 months to actually literally put together a strategy and execute it? Right? And so they need to be comfortable with ambiguity. Communication skills are absolutely paramount, but equally, I would say it's not only about the communication skill, it's the critical questioning skills. So the ability to be able to challenge and question statements that are being put in and requests that are being put in front of you so that you can really do a proper diagnosis of what the problem is rather than take it at face value and suddenly become busy with like running million initiatives that are going to overwhelm everybody and nobody's going to do anything about it. Be good at data. If you're not good at data, learn it. For sure. There's a constant curiosity. And so people are going to go, yeah, of course. There's a constant curiosity because the chances are the organization move faster than enablement because the customer environment is moving faster than enablement. So curiosity is open bridges with product marketing, with RevOps, have monthly, it's a lot of work, but have those monthly check up with industry peers, understand what's happening in the market. Use AI to actually get your insight as well. Go to conference, go to network, because otherwise enablement can get stale very quickly. Implementing a platform, implementing a methodology is not enablement in itself. Enablement is seeing the behavior that are needed for the execution of that strategy shifting and happening. That's what enablement is at the end of the day. And so having all of these skills, I think, are critically important. And then depending on the role itself, of course, you're going to need, facilitation, or you're going to need, I always say to people as well, get yourself instructional design trained and understand change management, because these are skills that are going to enable your learners and your participants in adopting what you're proposing in a much easier manner rather than tell them, right, this needs to happen, which never worked, right? Anybody listen to the parents when they were younger? I don't think so. And so it's true though, right?
I have
And
a
so
daughter. I can believe that.
you can be like,
I've got an 18-year-old daughter who's it's challenging. You talked about moving. I mean, it's been fascinating, Leah. Some amazing questions, and Celine, the wisdom that you've unpacked in some of those questions and the answers that you gave. You moved 27 times. You've dealt with massive change. I've got one final question. It feels like people like, me, you and Leah, that we're open to change. We're open to having a growth mindset and we're willing to take the risk to change.
Mhm.
But a lot of people aren't. So how do you bring people along that journey with you? If you're moving location or moving strategy or thinking of a new market, how do you bring those people along that are not willing to change?
Yeah, this is a challenging one. And this is the most challenging challenge I've ever had. Sometimes you can, sometimes you can't. So there's two approach to it, right? Sometimes you need to remove yourself from that environment if that's not what, if you're in an environment. I've once heard a leader say this, right? This is going to sound absolutely bonkers when you play it back. It's somebody else, right? So I was an external in the room, brought in that person to do a transformation, full transformation of the organization and expand internationally. It was a pretty big deal. And doing, suddenly coming out, acquiring company, doing multi-products, like huge transformation. And was told, once we need to do this, I want to make sure that nothing changes. Can we ponder on that sentence for a minute? And so depending where this is coming from in the organization, you also need to pick your battles. Because if that comes from somebody who's mid-layer, right, then you use their leaders in order to start instilling some of that change, and you start that change adoption, and then the world around them change, and they're going to have to change. If it comes from the top, in my experience, it's very challenging to move this. Once you've had the conversation, once you've had that challenging, and say, so when you say nothing changed, what is it that you want to keep the same? Because there might be, when people extrapolate, like you still need to qualify, right? Explain to me what can change and can't change. And so then you can come to an agreement, and people might say, oh yeah, no, what I meant is the culture can't change, but everything else can change, right? And so then you start unpacking and unraveling. But when it's literally, you can change the process and the tooling, but nothing else needs to change. This in isolation is not going to give you the GTM transformation you need in order to be able to hit your growth, right? And so you need to make a decision. So this is my own personal approach to it. Again, you can't do it alone. And so you need to rally with people. And so it's the same in a deal when you actually sell in a sales cycle. You are going to have people who are going to be averse to change. You're going to have people who are neutral towards your solution. You're going to have people who are super excited and are your champion. And you're going to have people who just want a completely different approach. So you mitigate that in the organization in exactly the same way. And again, gathering data, doing business case and whatever you need to do. But you also have to be mindful as to where that belief sits in the organization to be able to make a decision. And then what happens typically is time tells. So if you're patient in an organization, eventually time is going to come where that change is going to become inevitable. And then you can be completely part of it, because it's impossible, as you know, in the current environment to be able to not change.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Fascinating, Celine. Leah, thank you so much for your time today. Leah, amazing for your first podcast. Well done. Celine, thank you for being a guest on the sales episode of Sales Transformation Lab. Really appreciate it. And everyone, have a great day. And I hope you've learned some great lessons from Celine and Leah here today. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.